Hello everyone and welcome to this training session on NFR C2 Community Residence Finances. Today we are going to go through some of the key details that you will need to know from NFR C2 Community Residence Finances. We will be discussing at a high level the key parts of NFR C2 which you need to be aware of. Just to flag from the start, it's not possible to cover off everything in detail, so all staff are required to be familiar with the document. With that in mind, we would recommend that staff read the documents themselves, just to ensure that they're fully briefed on their day-to-day requirements. Firstly, what are the National Financial Regulations? So they're a set of policy documents which set out the financial controls for the organisation. They're not meant to be detailed procedural documents for financial processes or activities, as these are contained within your local procedures. But the aim of the NFRs is to provide high-level controls to guide your local procedures. Secondly, why is this training important? Staff must be aware of the minimum financial controls with regards to community-based resident services. Moving on to an important question which discusses who is the actual target audience for the NFRs. In short, the NFRs have a very broad reach. They apply to all permanent, temporary and agency staff of all HSE divisions, CHOs, hospital groups where services are provided on behalf of the HSE, and Section 38 and 39 providers where services are being provided on behalf of the HSE or where HSE grant aid and funding is being received. The key users of this particular NFR may include all staff employed by the HSE who work in and hold responsibility for community residential services and staff who assist clients with the management of their finances. Moving on then to the purpose of NFR C2. So NFR C2 sets out guidance in relation to community-based services provided by the HSE and the safeguards that should be in place in relation to this. Overall, the purpose is to set out the roles and responsibilities of HSE staff in relation to community residence finances, provide guidance on how to support client independence, safeguard our clients' interests, the HSE and its staff, provide clear steps to show how to protect clients' money, ensure the HSE fulfills its duties correctly on behalf of its clients, and finally then details how the HSE levies a charge for the accommodation and maintenance or daily living costs of clients. There are some key principles to remember with regards to managing community resident finances. Firstly, independence. The HSE must promote client independence as much as possible, so this means allowing them to make their own decisions as far as possible, for example on their income, spending and savings. Secondly, staff are obviously dealing with clients' funds, so this property must be safeguarded. For example, the resident's finances must be kept in a separate bank account to protect both the client and the HSE from exposure to avoidable risk. Lastly, segregation of duties. At no time should one person be responsible for each part of a client's financial transactions. On this next slide, we will discuss the concept of capacity and consent, which are important concepts for the management of community resident finances. Put simply, capacity refers to the ability of a client to understand the nature and consequences of a decision. Capacity is defined in full in the Assisted Decision Making Act of 2015, and the concept is dealt with in detail within Section 5 of NFR C1. The idea of consent means the client knowingly makes decisions for themselves. Staff must clearly know the legal position about capacity and consent. Staff should not defer to relatives or third parties to make decisions on behalf of vulnerable clients, and while those third parties may be useful in providing information which can support a decision, they cannot legally make a decision for the client. Lastly, safeguarding. So all staff have a role in protecting clients from all forms of abuse, including financial abuse or exploitation. It's important staff remain vigilant in this regard. Unpaid contributions may indicate that a client's funds are being misused by a third party without their knowledge. The obligations and responsibilities of an agent outlined by the Department of Social Protection are very clear. Third parties who elect to support vulnerable adults must make sure the payments made on behalf of the client are used for the benefit of the client. When we speak about financial or material abuse, we refer to things like theft, fraud and exploitation. It includes pressure in connection with wills, property or inheritance and financial transactions. It also includes the misuse or deliberate and illegal use of property, possessions and benefits. So if you do have concerns about abuse or exploitation of a client, you can contact the safeguarding team confidentially, and you can get more information on safeguarding on the HSE website. Moving on then to client entitlements. So staff may be entitled to claim income or benefits from a wide variety of sources such as the Department of Social Protection, the HSE, wards of court office or an occupational pension. Staff should encourage the client to apply to have their entitlements processed by the relevant authority. Clients may get help from the management of the residence in which they reside to obtain and complete the necessary documents. If the client does not hold a medical card, this should also be applied for with the help of management in the residence unless it is clear that they are not entitled to one. If a client moves residence, for example from an institutional setting, then the residence should arrange to transfer their entitlements to their new community residence. Staff must keep records for each resident of their entitlement, financial or otherwise. Staff must also record dates for renewals or changes to client benefits, especially where benefits are not automatically increased or renewed. It's also important in the case of means-tested allowances that you notify any changes in the client's financial circumstance to the relevant agency. This will enable them to reassess them. So the HSE levy a charge for provision of certain services. Levying a charge means the HSE impose a fee on clients. The HSE typically take a fee from one of their payments. Certain contributions do not apply where the client's placement is funded by the Nursing Home Support Scheme. That scheme usually applies to a nursing home or long-stay placement. The HSE levy a contribution charge for services where they provide accommodation and maintenance or daily living costs, or where others provide accommodation and maintenance on the HSE's behalf. This is called a long-stay contribution and is known as RISMAC, the Residential Support Services Maintenance and Accommodation Contribution. Some key information on RISMAC is as follows. So RISMAC applies if the client has been receiving residential support services for more than 30 days in the last 12 months. Clients only pay for days when they get residential support services from their provider. A day is counted if the service is received overnight, that is, includes midnight. The contribution goes towards accommodation and maintenance costs, for example heating, electricity, groceries and meals. Some or all of the client's daily living costs like food, utility bills and so on may be provided by the HSE or on behalf of the HSE, but accommodation may not. Where some of the client's daily living costs are not provided by the HSE, such as rent, the long-stay contribution will be reduced by that rent payment or by €30 a week, whichever is more. A medical card does not exempt a client from paying RISMAC. There are 3 different types of accommodation covered by RISMAC. Firstly, Category A accommodation. This is full-time, 24-hour medical or nursing care. Secondly, Category B accommodation. This is where there is a part-time, less than 24-hour medical or nursing care. And finally, Category C accommodation. This is other accommodation like independent living settings. There is also a maximum rate of contribution. So if a client income is more than a certain amount, they pay the maximum rate. If their income is lower, they pay less. The HSE has responsibility when it comes to managing clients' money. When the HSE receive and hold money, they must identify it as the client's income, issue the appropriate receipts and bank it properly. HSE staff must use finances and resources in a way that is consistent with standards of accountability, internal control and the management of financial risk. As previously mentioned, there must be strict segregation of duties. Residences that collect income in the form of RISMAC or other contribution must make sure that all cash handling and banking of monies comply with relevant procedures. Each resident must keep a log detailing all financial transactions, and it must be reconciled with each resident's bank statement. Residences must also put in place local procedures to make sure that an audit trail exists. In relation to the supported banking service, the HSE should encourage clients to hold separate bank accounts to manage their personal funds. And if they need help to operate these accounts, local areas should put in place robust procedures to safeguard both the client and the HSE from exposure to avoidable risk. Staff must assess each client to see what support they need in managing their monies, in line with their wishes. The support required will largely fall into 2 levels: minimal support or support with oversight. A client will need minimal support if they are vulnerable to financial abuse, but they can understand and manage, or they have been given the power to manage their own finances. Support with oversight is where a client requires more supervision and support from a service provider, and it places a significant responsibility on the support provider. Clients being supported in this way to manage their finances should have an account in their own name into which their income is paid. They will have an ATM card for the account and a PIN number, but the support provider must keep one or both for safekeeping. Moving on then to financial management. So residences must make sure that procedures are in place so that records are documented and duties are segregated. Residences must also make sure that its financial records and books are reviewed on a regular basis so that all money and property are properly accounted for and the applicable regulations are complied with. In the residence, an individual personal file must be set up for each client. This personal file will include things like a unique client reference number, date of arrival, date of departure, details of next of kin, details of PPP held, the financial assessment form, bank details and related correspondence, details on whether or not the client is charged rental, and finally then details of entitlements, financial or otherwise, that the client is entitled to claim. The residents must list all clients that are going to be paying their rents or RISMAC by direct debit into the central HSE bank account, and it might include things like the client's name, the amount of the direct debit, the frequency of the direct debit, the community resident name, the address of residence to which receipts should be issued, and the cost centre, the general ledger code which indicates where the income of the residents is posted in the HSE accounts. In addition, some community residents have to make purchases outside of the purchase to pay processes. These units must get approval from designated officers before they do so. All such purchases should be recorded through petty cash or procurement card systems in full compliance with NFR B5 banking, cash and card payments. The management of resident finances will be examined regularly by the Community Healthcare Organisation Management and also by internal and external auditors. This is done to make sure that they comply with agreed policy and legislation. So that brings me to the end of the training session on NFR C2 Community Resident Finances. On this slide is the contact details for the governance and compliance team if anyone has any questions. So you can contact us on govn.compliance@hse.ie. On this slide as well we have some useful training resources and also a governance and compliance YouTube channel. And that contains videos of each of the 11 NFRs and they are good to watch. Most of them are just 15 or 20 minutes long, so they're good to watch if you just want a refresher on any of the NFRs. Your attention and attendance today is very much appreciated and thank you for taking the time to join this session.